Deck Building. I'm your host, Demo, and this is a deck I definitely didn't think I would be making. This is Svella Ice Shaper. Now, when I did my spoiler review, it was, I was really not impressed. Nor should I be, and nor should anybody be. It is a really unimpressive card. However, I'm sure there are people out there that might actually want to make this deck. And, I gave it a second look, and I was like, okay, I do have a couple of ideas, right? There are a couple of ideas that I thought I could throw in there. And so I thought, all right, let's give it a shot. Why not? And I'm still not super excited about it, but I did make a deck for it. So I thought, why not just do a deck for anyone out there that actually wants to give this guy a shot? I find him very slow and tedious. Having to tap him every time to make an icy manolith. And then look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may cast a spell from among them without paying its mana cost. Essentially, you have to cast something that costs at least 8 to make this worthwhile, right? If you look at the top 4 cards of your library and you cast something, if you cast a Cultivate, wow, you just spent 8 mana to cast a Cultivate. That's so bad, right? So we really want to make it so that if we shoot this ability off, we're at least going to make it worth our while. So how are we going to do that? I did have a plan when I'm making this deck, right? So the first card I thought of was Braid of Fire. This is a silly card from back in the day when the rules were very different, right? Cumulative upkeep, add 1 red mana. And you look at this card, I remember when I first saw it, I was like, huh? Pay 1 red mana, right? When you first see this, you're like, so I have to pay, so it has a cumulative upkeep of paying 1 red mana? No. It adds 1 red mana, and that's all it does, right? What this does is it makes mana, right? And this was a card that they printed when mana burn was still a thing, and it isn't a thing anymore. Unfortunately, I actually like mana burn. I think it adds a very interesting aspect to the game. However, it's free mana. That's it. Braid of Fire just sits there and makes free mana. So what this is good for is a mana sink, right? So you could put this, if you have a Thrasios deck, right? This is a great card that you could put in a Thrasios deck if you have a red Thrasios deck. This is just free mana that you can just dump into your Thrasios ability every single turn, right? Because it just sits there and it gets bigger and bigger. It's 1 mana the first time, then 2, then 3, then 4. And this is a card that's going to sit on the battlefield and your opponents aren't going to give a crap about it. It's just going to sit there and make you mana the whole game. So for our commander, it's great because you have to use the mana during your upkeep, right? So you can't use it to cast spells unless you have stuff with flash. We get our Svella out and we can just start making those icy manolith tokens in our upkeep, right? Why not, right? We're getting that free mana, might as well use it. And then eventually, when our Braid of Fire has like 7 counters on it, it's basically where we can now use our Svella ability for free, right? The big one, the 8 mana cast things for free ability is going to cost us 1 green mana, and that's it. So Braid of Fire is the best card in this deck. Unfortunately, there is 0 ways we can actually get it into our hand. Nothing in Gruul searches for enchantments. Obviously, we don't have any of those fantastic black tutors. So we just have to hope that we get it. Thran Turbine is sort of a mini way of, this is another card that you can just throw in a Thrasios deck or I had this in my Lazolda deck because it just allows me to use that ability for free. But it's going to allow us to use his first ability for 1 mana, right? Because we get the 2 colorless mana from this, and then we only need 1 more mana to create a token, right? So it's just free mana. And there are other things that we can use that mana for, like Cryptic Trilobite. Right? Again, Cryptic Trial. I was looking for ways that we can create mana that only are used for abilities. And this is one, right? Remove a +1/+1 counter from the Trilobite, add 2 colorless. This is another card that when it first got spoiled, people were like, oh, it's so busted. It's going to do this and it's going to do that. And it really didn't do much and people don't really use it much. It does combo with a lot of stuff, but I don't know, boring combos, right? But in this deck, it's great because, the 2 colorless mana, you're only going to use it to activate abilities. Hearthstone, obviously, as most people know, is another way to do this. Again, this is going to reduce that cost more. So Svella's abilities are really mana intensive and we want to try to reduce that as much as possible. Now that we've done that, what are we going to do? Well, we need to manipulate the top of our library a little. Essentially, if you looked at my Hans Eriksson deck, we're doing a lot of the same stuff. Scroll Rack is great for that, right? Scroll Rack is the best card. In this deck, Scroll Rack is the best card for that because if we draw one of our, expensive spells, we want to be able to put it back on top of our library. And we also want to dig 4 deep. We want to dig more than 4, right? That's why Sensei's Divining Top isn't great in this deck. Not as good. Sensei's Divining Top is great in the hands deck, not so good in this deck, because digging 3 deep doesn't really help us much, because what if we don't have anything in the top 3 that we want to cast? There's no way for us to get rid of it, right? Also, Sylvan Tutor and Worldly Tutor, obviously, these are going to be great, because if we want to shoot that ability off, let's make sure there's something big on top of our deck that we can use. We also have Parallel Lives and Doubling Season, because we want to double up those tokens. Let's take advantage of that, right? So now I'm trying to think, how can we make more tokens so we can get more mana? Doubling Season also plays double duty with Trilobite, because now Trilobite is going to be putting 2 counters on itself, right? It's going to come into play with double counters, and then it's going to be putting 2 counters. So that's going to be really helpful with that as well. Don't really have a lot of other +1/+1 counter stuff in here. Tireless Tracker is one. So Tireless Tracker we can put double counters on, but we can also make double clue tokens. I put this in the deck. Again, it's just a good value card. But because we do have those doubling token effects, it's going to be extra good. And we do have cards that want us to have lots of artifacts in play also. I also went down that route. And then Second Harvest. Again, we can, once we make 3 or 4 of those Icy Manalists, we can Second Harvest and just create double the amount. Azuri's Brigade is going to want us to have, again, Gruul is not great for this, if you want to hate on artifacts, Gruul, man, they're all over that. They're all over hating artifacts and destroying artifacts. Fantastic if you want to do that. But if you want to play an artifact deck in Gruul, not a lot of options. Azuri's Brigade is one of them. We're definitely going to have Metalcraft for sure. So an 8/8 Trampler for 4, pretty good. I also put Hellkite Tyrant in here, just a good card, but we're going to have a lot of artifacts in play anyway. I mean, we might even be able to pull this off without even stealing any artifacts from our opponents. Maybe we can just get 20 artifacts all on our own and win the game. And then Emerald Gear Smasher, at least this gives us an opportunity we can start sacrificing those. If we just are sitting there making Icy Manalists and we don't need the mana, we just have lots of mana, let's sacrifice them to do 2 damage to each opponent, right? I wanted to figure out something else we could do with those artifacts, and I always like having a secondary strategy in my decks. What if the number one thing we're doing isn't working so well? What if our opponents keep killing our commander, and so we can't get it off, that second ability? Like maybe they see that second ability, and someone who's not very wise to the crazy things that happen in the game actually think that ability is really busted, even though it's not nearly as good as a Golos, for example. Golos just has that ability, except way better. But it could happen, right? So let's have a secondary strategy. Indomitable Creativity. So while I was looking up things that Gruul can do with artifacts, this is one I came across, and then I started to formulate a secondary plan, right? So it's going to destroy X target artifacts and or creatures for each permanent destroyed this way. Its controller reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal an artifact or creature card. So I was thinking, what we could do is we could create 5 or 6 Manaliths, and then we'll just destroy all of our own Manaliths. And they tap for mana, so we're going to tap them all for mana. We only have to pay the 3 red. We can destroy them all, and it's a little risky because we don't know what we're going to get. I mean, we do have Scroll Rack in this deck, right? We do have Thran Turbine, so maybe we'll get those off the top, which isn't great. But we also do have a lot of really big things we can get off the top too. So I would imagine if we set this for 4, let's say, and we get 4 things off the top, I imagine probably the chances are we're going to get 2 small things and 2 really big things. It's about a 50-50. So you want to do at least 4, I think. In order to guarantee yourself a couple of big things. Reality Scramble is another one. I purposely did this so that we only have a couple of artifacts. We have no mana rocks in this deck. So if we target one of our Manaliths, our Icy Manalith tokens, pretty good chance we're going to get, if we get a Scroll Rack, great. We need it for this deck. It's really good in the deck. So that's not a bad thing. But there's also a chance we get a Blightsteel Colossus, right? So this is going to be really good in this deck where you can cash in those Icy Manalith tokens that, at some point are going to be pretty useless to us. I also put Mana Geyser in this deck. Again, just another great card, but there are going to be times when we have a Blightsteel Colossus or one of these huge creatures in our hand that we wanna just hard cast, and Mana Geyser is a way that we can do that. I also have Lure of Prey and Dramatic Entrance. These are great cards. If you're playing any deck where you have a bunch of really big creatures, this is a great way to just cheat them into play. Both of them are at instant speed. Lure of Prey costs 4, and all we need is our opponents to cast a creature spell. Gee, I wonder if that's going to happen ever, And Dramatic Entrance is just put a green creature card into your hand from play. And because of this, and because of the reality scramble, and because of the indomitable creativity, I didn't put a lot of big red creatures in this deck. All of our big payoffs are green creatures or artifact creatures, because we want to be able to hit them with any of these effects, right? Lure of Prey and Dramatic Entrance are only going to get green creatures into play. So I went with pretty much just big green payoffs and big artifact payoffs. And of course, there's a bunch of those, so that wasn't really a big issue for us. So before I get to the creatures, I'll reshape the earth. So 9 mana, put 10 lands into play. Again, we want to probably cast this off of our Svella. So this is going to be, we pay 8 and this costs 9, so we save 1 mana. I mean, that's at least it's something, right? But more importantly, we get lands into play so that we can also hard cast some of this silly, dumb stuff that we have. Apex Devastator. This guy's great, because it's a cast, right? Svella's ability is a cast, so we are going to be casting this. So we get our 10/10 and we get all those cascades. And man, we can hit some big stuff off of those cascades. World Spineworm, sure, right? Now we would just want to be chucking huge creatures at our opponents. I like Stonehoof Chieftain because I like that it has indestructible. Also gives some of our other big creatures indestructible. I don't want to have to go through all this effort of getting something on the battlefield and then just have it die. That always sucks. Taras Dynasty, he's going to be, again, we're going to be paying 8 mana for an 8-drop, so that's not terrible. But, it's removal, and we do need removal in the deck. Also, again, we can cheat these things out, right? Lure of Prey and Dramatic Entrance can cheat out a Terrastodon for 4 or 5 mana, so that's pretty good. And then the artifacts, again, Blightsteel Colossus, obviously. This is a card that I don't love to play, but again, this is sort of when I talked about, some of my other decks. If I'm playing a commander that is really underwhelming, and I'm doing a strategy that's really kind of silly, I don't mind throwing some of these cards in there just to make our lives a little easier. Ancient Stone Idol, right? So we're going to get a 12/12 with Trample. Again, it has that ability that when it dies, we at least get something out of it. I like Colossus of Acro. 10/10, it's indestructible. It's got Defender, so it's a great blocker. But we are going to have tons of mana eventually, right? Eventually, we're going to cast a Zendikar Resurgence. We're going to cast a Reshape the Earth, or we're going to just have a ton of Icy Manaless, and we can just use that. I mean, this is a card I've been wanting to put in the deck for a long time, and this deck, it fits in. Why not? And then I have Dreamshaper Shaman. I wanted to be able to sacrifice those Manaless to get something out of it. This one, we're going to pay 3, sacrifice a non-land permanent. So we're going to sack probably one of our Icy Manaless. If we do, we reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal a non-land permanent card, and we put it onto the battlefield. We're already going to be looking at the top of our library. We're already going to be having huge things that we want to cheat into play. So this just seems great. We can sack a useless Manalith and get a Blightsteel Colossus onto the battlefield. Aid from the Cowl is another card that can do that, right? It can just cheat something into play if we can get Revolt and get something off the battlefield. And then we got Rime Tender. So Rime Tender is going to untap another target snow permanent. We can use this, just to untap our lands or untap our Icy Manaless, but we can also use it to untap our commander, right? Say we want to make 2 Icy Manaless in a turn. We can do that. If we have a crazy amount of mana, we can also use his other ability twice in a turn. 1,000-Year Elixir, again. This can be used to untap our commander so we can use it again. Also allows us to use our commander immediately when he comes into play. Like I've said 1,000 times, no pun intended, 1,000-Year Elixir is, to me, an auto-include in any deck where you want to be tapping your commander. And Rhythm of the Wild, again, it just gives our creatures haste, essentially, which means we can use our commander right away. We can use our Trilobite right away. Any of our giant creatures we can attack with right away. I mean, I shouldn't even need to say it because it's just an auto-include in any Gruul deck, really. And that's, pretty much the deck. Pretty much the deck is, I didn't think Svella was good enough just to do what he's doing on his own. So I did want something else. And I thought, okay, well, I can sort of find other ways to cheat creatures into play and cheat stuff into play. You know, I really liked, the reason why I decided to go with this deck is, first of all, I really liked using Braid of Fire. I just thought this is a great way to use that. And I also really like that idea of indomitable creativity, and we destroy our own manaless, and we, you know, dump a bunch of, you know, we destroy 4 of our manaless, and we get a Blightsteel Colossus, a Nullstone Gargoyle, and a Great Henge in play. I mean, that just seems like a great payoff to me. So it's an interesting deck. You know, I'm going to give it a shot. I don't know if I'm going to hang on to it and make it myself personally. I just thought I'll give it a shot. I'm up to a challenge, so why not? There's maybe somebody out there who wants to make a Svella deck, and this is one way that you could definitely do it. So that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in.